the president-elect touts his role in saving hundreds of U.S. workers' jobs, visiting their plant in Indiana, and new details emerge about the financial incentives that sealed the deal. Is the president-elect making the most of his political victory? Thank you tour. We're standing by for some of the first extended public remarks by Donald Trump since he won the election. He's about to hold a campaign-style rally in Ohio. CNN will carry it live. General decision? We're told that the next commander-in-chief has settled on his choice for defense secretary. How would retired Marine Corps General James Mattis influence America's security? I'll get reaction from a war veteran turned congressman. And out of fuel, investigators now are pointing to a shocking cause of a deadly charter plane crash. How could the fuel tank of a commercial jet run empty in mid-flight? We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news on the Trump transition. Tonight, a source is telling CNN the president-elect has zeroed in on retired Marine Corps General James Mattis to become the Secretary of Defense. We're told an official announcement will happen next week. A Trump spokesman insists a final decision has not yet been made. We'll see if the president-elect offers any new details about his transition when he speaks in Ohio very soon. He's holding his first post-election rally to kick off what he's calling his thank you tour. CNN will carry it live. Just a few hours ago, Trump visited the Carrier plant in Indiana, touting the deal he made with the company to keep more than 1,000 jobs in the United States. He warned other companies considering leaving the U.S. for Mexico or any place else, they would face consequences. Also tonight, officials now believe the deadly crash of a soccer team's charter flight had a very surprising cause. The jet ran out of fuel. Audio recordings reveal a crew member made a frantic call to air traffic control just before the crash, talking about a failure of electricity and fuel. I'll talk about the Trump transition with Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. There you see him. He's standing by live, along with our correspondents and analysts as we cover the day's top stories. Up first, let's go to CNN's Sunlen Serfati with more on the Trump transition. Sunlen, the president-elect hasn't spoken out like he's doing today since the election. Update our viewers.
That's right, he hasn't, Wolf. Donald Trump has mainly been spending the last 3 weeks since elected president here, holed up at Trump Towers, holding meetings and job interviews to fill out his cabinet posts. But transition officials tell us this is something that he very much wanted to do, not only to get out and thank supporters, but also to tout one of his first deals as president-elect. Tonight, President-elect Donald Trump is taking his show back on the road.
Is there any place more fun to be than a Trump rally?
Trump is holding a campaign-style rally in Cincinnati, Ohio. The first of many thank you events the president-elect is planning across the country in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
I want to really thank the people of Indiana. We had 2 massive victories in a very short period of time.
But before his Ohio stop, Trump took a victory lap, touring a Carrier plant in Indianapolis to tout a campaign promise met.
I said, Carrier will never leave.
Trump celebrating the deal he helped reach with the air conditioning manufacturer to save 1,000 jobs from being shipped to Mexico, something he said as a candidate he wouldn't let happen.
They're going to say, Mr. President, Carrier has decided to stay in Indiana. Thank you, sir.
Sources familiar with the deal tell CNN that Carrier will receive $7 million in financial incentives over the next 10 years from Indiana to keep those jobs in the state.
Companies are not going to leave the United States anymore without consequences. Not going to happen.
The deal is getting a mixed reaction on Capitol Hill. House Speaker Paul Ryan welcoming the news.
Well, I'm pretty happy that we're keeping jobs in America, aren't you?
Thank you.
But former Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders is sounding the alarm, saying Carrier, quote, took Trump hostage and won, setting a bad precedent for the new administration by signaling, quote, to every corporation in America that they can threaten to offshore jobs in exchange for business-friendly tax benefits and incentives.
Meantime, the suspense continues to build as Trump works to fill out his administration. Still hanging in the balance, the highest profile of the cabinet posts, Secretary of State. Transition officials confirm Trump has narrowed the list down to a final 4.
These discussions I've had with him have been enlightening and interesting and engaging.
Trump loyalist Newt Gingrich ripping finalist Mitt Romney for his public vying for the job.
You have never, ever in your career seen a serious adult who's wealthy, independent, has been a presidential nominee, suck up at the rate that Mitt Romney is sucking up.
Meantime, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren returning to her attack dog role, slamming Trump's nominee for Treasury Secretary, former Goldman Sachs banker Steve Mnuchin.
What Donald Trump is doing is he's literally handing the keys to the Treasury over to a Wall Street banker who helped cause the crash.
And tonight it seems that President-elect Donald Trump may be inching towards making a key decision on another big cabinet post. A source telling CNN that Trump is zeroing in on General James Mattis for Secretary of Defense, although Wolf transition officials tonight say that nothing is done yet. Wolf?
It's not done until Donald Trump says it's done, or tweets, as I said, that it's done. We'll see soon enough, I'm sure. Thanks very much for that, Sunland. Let's go to Cincinnati right now, where President-elect Trump will be speaking very, very soon. Our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, is there for us. So what can we expect tonight, Jim?
Well, Wolf, as the transition team has been talking about all day long, this is going to be an opportunity for Donald Trump to thank his voters for that resounding victory, at least in the Electoral College that we saw on November 8th. And as we heard in Indiana earlier today at the event at that Carrier factory that is going to be staying open and keeping about 1,000 people employed, Donald Trump is back to talking about trade. He's back to sounding like a trade warrior. Consider how he was talking about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that he railed against so much during the campaign. He was back talking about it again earlier today in Indiana. Here's what he had to say.
We have NAFTA, which is a total and complete disaster. It's a total and complete disaster. It's a one-lane highway into Mexico. Nothing coming our way, everything going their way. And I don't have to mention who signed it anymore. It's so nice. I don't have to mention who backed it anymore, right? We don't have to mention that anymore, fortunately. But it's a one-way street, and it's going to be changed. It's going to be changed.
And that's obviously a trade message that is very effective in places like Cincinnati, Ohio, where Donald Trump will be having this thank his voters rally here coming up in about an hour from now. If it wasn't for places like Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Donald Trump would not be president-elect of the United States right now, Wolf. One thing that we should point out, just to sort of give you a sense of the room here, we're inside an arena in downtown Cincinnati that should typically seat about 17,000 to 18,000 people. Just want to show you the crowd right now. This venue is nowhere near its capacity in terms of seating right now. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of empty seats right now. We just sent one of our producers outside who also reports there's not a line of people waiting to get inside. Obviously, we're an hour away from this rally beginning, so more people could file in and potentially line up outside. But, Wolf, we are nowhere near what we saw, the kind of crowds that we saw during the campaign. Obviously, when the election is over, a lot of voters move on. Wolf.
All right, we'll see how many people actually show up. Thanks very much. We'll, of course, stand by for live coverage. Jim Acosta reporting. Let's talk a little bit about all the news in the Trump transition. Right now, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is joining us. He's a veteran of the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
You bet, Wolf. Thanks.
All right, so the Trump campaign says it's not a done deal yet, but would you support the retired Marine Corps General James Mattis as Defense Secretary? You think that would be a good idea, even though he's been only out of active duty for 3 years?
Yeah, I love Mad Dog Mattis. Great general. You know, the thing that you notice about good leaders is what his people say about him. And you see people that have worked for James Mattis, and they just said they'd basically follow this guy into any conditions, into hell, because he'd do the same for them. And that's the kind of leader I think the Defense Department needs. And there's an advantage, by the way, to having somebody that was a general in this position, because they know, in essence, where the skeletons are buried. So, you know, in many cases, there's problems with defense acquisitions and the way the Defense Department works that needs reform. And if you're on the inside as a general, when you come out, you're able to know where that is and make some changes. So I think he's a great pick and would love it if that's it.
But you appreciate the tradition of civilian leadership at the Department of Defense.
Yeah, you do, and I think it's essential. And I think the big key to understand is, you know, he's been out for 3 years. I don't know why the number was set at 7 back in the day, whenever this was, early 1900s. But he's been out for 3 years. He's in a civilian capacity. So it's not like we're taking somebody right out of uniformed service and installing them in this position. So that'll be a debate the Senate's going to have, and I think ultimately it'll come out favorably.
If he is named a defense secretary, you have a retired general of the Department of Defense, you have a retired lieutenant general, Mike Flynn, as the president's national security advisor. Would that effectively rule out retired General David Petraeus as Secretary of State, because there would be fear too many generals are running national security?
I don't know. Who knows? You know, one of the things I guess you're seeing in foreign policy and in these areas is that, you know, Donald Trump's made it clear he's going to surround himself with experts. And he knows he's coming in without government experience. You know, he knows that there's an advantage to coming in without government experience, but you have to have people that have been involved in the military and in government to be able to surround him. And it seems like he's doing that. I don't know if that necessarily bodes poorly for Petraeus or not, but I think, you know, of the finalists I'm hearing in the Secretary of State race, I think we could end up with somebody pretty good.
Well, what do you think? Who do you like of the final four, as they're called?
I like Mitt. I think he'd be a fantastic pick. You know, whether that's where he ends up going or not, that's his decision. But you know, there's a lot of good options. There's nobody I really see that's being named potentially for Secretary of State that I'm concerned with. These are people that understand America's role in the world, understand an encroaching Russia, understand the tragedy in Syria with 500,000 dead Syrians, and I think these are the people that can fix this problem in the long run.
And so the conviction of General Petraeus, one-count misdemeanor for mishandling classified information. He pleaded guilty to that plea bargain agreement. That doesn't bother you?
Well, it's a concern, obviously, and I think, you know, Donald Trump and the team has probably taken that into account. I think he would have to be, General Petraeus would probably have to talk a little more about it and be accountable to that. But you know what? He's a brilliant mind. I mean, David Petraeus is somebody that, in essence, helped build the resurgence in Iraq and authored the surge and turned around a lot of areas that were challenging. So he has the skill set. This could be an issue, and I think that'll be taken into account as the final decision's made.
And what about Rudy Giuliani's international business deals? Some have suggested that potentially could be a problem. Do you think it could be?
Well, again, it's going to be up to the president-elect and the folks that confirm him. You know, it's tough to kind of get into every name and, you know, what's the good and what's the bad, because we just don't know. But I think all the names I've heard so far would do a great job as Secretary of State. And I think I want to know. I hope it's announced soon, because I think everybody's kind of had enough waiting on this.
Yeah, a lot of people are increasingly thinking Senator Bob of Tennessee, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, might be the safest choice. He would sail through confirmation process. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a tradition of senators being able to, in essence, sail through the Senate pretty easily. Bob Corker has great relationships on the Democratic and Republican side. He's very diplomatic, which you obviously need, and the chief diplomat for the United States. I think he'd be fantastic, too. So, you know, again, of all the finalists I'm hearing, there's nobody that, for me as a foreign policy guy and somebody that cares about these issues deeply, there's nobody that puts up huge red flags that are the finalists for this position.
Let's talk a little bit about his victory lap today over in Indianapolis at the Carrier plant. He worked out a deal, as you know, to keep more than 1,000 jobs in Indiana. Very important deal, if you will. At the top of his speech, though, it sounded like a campaign rally, if you will. He was talking about himself a lot, congratulating himself. You've been critical of him. You were critical of him during the campaign. Is that presidential right now, to see him out there doing what he obviously so often Biden as so successfully did during the Republican primaries and in the general election?
You know, he's such a unique guy, and this is everything about this is unique, you know, from the Twitter to everything else, that it's hard to judge and say, is this presidential? Because he's kind of thrown out the whole script on how this has always worked. You know, I mean, even President Obama, when he was elected, he did things that were considered not presidential, going on YouTube and everything else, and now it just becomes the narrative of how a president is. So I know for a fact, and hearing people talk, that Donald Trump gets energized in front of big crowds, and if this is what's taking you on as politicians, when you go and talk to people, you kind of get re-excited and re-energized, and if this is the way he feels like he connects with his people and his voters and America, that might be a good thing.
Stick around, Congressman. We have more to discuss. I need to take a quick break. We'll resume our conversation right after this.
All right.